Hello, I'm Rachel Rushman, and I am the Program Manager for the Producer-Led Watershed Protection Grant Program. Today I'm going to talk with you about some frequently asked questions and the main things that you need to know as a new or existing 2021 Producer-Led Grant applicant. So let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is review your contract. I'm going to note a couple of changes. So if you've already received funding through our program before, I'm going to identify a couple of new things that you haven't seen in prior contracts. But particularly if you're a new producer-led group through our program, I'd highly recommend looking through your contract and make sure you fully understand the requirements that are outlined in there. First, I'm going to cover our new cost share policy. So this is something that we have not initiated before, but we think is very important, especially based on the fact that there are several groups that have been around for at least 3 years or more through our program. And the intention of our program is to make sure that new producers are trying practices that are good for soil health and water quality. And the intention is not to continue to fund a farmer through incentive payments for practices that they already are finding valuable. So the policy is that we do not fund payments to farmers on the same acres for that same practice beyond 3 years. Allowable acres are acres that have not otherwise been cost shared by the producer-led program and or any other local, state, or federal programs for that same exact practice and or management method for more than 3 years. And so an example of this would be if a farmer received a cover crop incentive payment on a field planted to, say, a rye cover crop after corn silage for 3 years in a row, that field then would be ineligible for cost share for planting a rye cover crop the 4th year. However, if the farmer wanted to plant a multi-species mix cover crop after corn silage or try interseeding in corn silage, so they're trying to learn something new, they're trying to try a different practice, that same field would be eligible the 4th year because this would be considered a different conservation practice or trying a different management method. If you have any questions on this, you can definitely reach out to me. So another piece of the contract that has changed is the Acknowledgement Section. And so this is Section 17 of your contract. I'm just going to read this to make sure I don't forget anything. The requirement is that you acknowledge the department's support on any publications written or published or any audiovisual produced with department financial support that publicizes, announces, or promotes the projects, activities, and events resulting from this contract. Funding credit, including department logo, must appear in all program, publicity, and promotional materials. When applying the logo to materials, do not resize disproportionately, change the colors, or place on a busy background. The logo must be legible. You can access the logo on the Producer-Led web page. The following wording should be included with the logo. Funding for this was made possible in part by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. The views expressed in written materials, publications, speakers, and moderators do not necessarily reflect the official policies of DATCAP, nor does any mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the state of Wisconsin. Now, I will say that if you have an event flyer or you have materials at an event, say like event signage that's showcasing your event sponsors, no, you do not need to include that wording. But please just do acknowledge the department if you are using any of our funds for putting on your event. So I want to cover some networking opportunities too. The Producer-Led Watershed Protection Grant Workshop will be held 2 half days this year. So February 22nd in the afternoon and then February 23rd in the morning. I'll save the date went out on this, but I will be sending a formal invite out. If you have not received any information on this, please let me know. The thing to keep in mind here is that at least one farmer and one collaborator from each group must attend. Another way to connect with groups is through our new regional networks. Each one of your groups is automatically put in one of the 4 regions based on location. You'll be contacted by the coordinator of your network if you're a new group to participate and collaborate with other groups in your region. And so this looks like, maybe potential regional speakers, maybe collaborating on a regional event, or just communicating quarterly or something, depending on the needs of the group, to better share information across the region and then across the state. Some other ways to share and communicate are through our producer-led webinar series. We do this in partnership with UW Discovery Farms, and you can access all the information on the webinar series on our producer-led web page. We also have a producer-led newsletter, so if you ever have topics you'd like to share, we would be happy to include those in the newsletter. And then we also have this listserv, so it's prod-led grants at list.wis.gov. And if you send an email to this listserv, it will go to all of the main contacts through the producer-led network. So if you want to share a flyer for an event or a good research article that you came across, feel free to share this. Just keep in mind that when you reply all to the listserv, it does reply back to the listserv and not to the person that sent it. I also just want to point out too that on the DATCAP webpage, we have this blue bar section in the middle of the page. And if you're a new group in particular, this is a perfect way to get to know what more groups are working on, look at more DATCAP resources, look at the e-news updates, which are the newsletters, and things like that. All right, so now I'm going to get into talking a little bit about this new concept called Sharepoint. Some of you may be familiar and some of you may not. I know it was fairly new to me. We, in an effort to try to better manage the data coming through the producer-led program, needed a system that was better than our Excel spreadsheets that we were using. And so Sharepoint allows us to compile and collect information and then analyze that information much easier. And so that's the reason for this change. Eventually, all the forms that you see here, so the extension request form, budget change, reimbursement, tracking sheets, those are all going to be available on Sharepoint and eventually will all be required to be submitted on Sharepoint. For now, you can submit these forms to prodled@wisconsin.gov. So that's just PRODLED at wisconsin.gov. So now with Sharepoint, we are requiring you to submit your annual report through Sharepoint now. So we are extending the deadline for this until March 1st of 2021. But we are now requiring annual reports. So even if you extend your funds, you still need to submit a report based on the work you did in that calendar year. Sharepoint looks a lot like any Microsoft product, so it looks kind of like Microsoft Word as far as the visual layout. So hopefully it won't be too confusing for people. The Sharepoint site is secure, so it does require a login in order to access the Sharepoint site. So every group is going to be required to create a WILMS login, which is a management system for passwords. And this will not be managed by DATCAP staff. It is managed by a different state agency staff. So this is something where you're going to make the login and then you'll be able to use Sharepoint and then you'll be able to create a new annual report form in Sharepoint, enter all the information in there, and then actually submit it through Sharepoint too. This also allows you to see what you've submitted, and it will be saved in there. And so you can think of it as a opportunity to save a lot of different information about your group within your own little Sharepoint site. I will say too that the WILMS login should be for the group and not just for an individual person. You want to make sure that the people that need access to the annual report will have access to that. Your match does need to be identified in the annual report. This is becoming more and more important. We are also going to ask for additional information regarding demonstrations and trials, and that will be a separate form available in SharePoint as well, because we really want to be able to share the good work that groups are doing and be able to share the lessons learned that are coming from those demonstrations and trials. So I will be sending this out to everyone also, but here below in green is the link in order to initiate that login creation process and then to be able to use SharePoint. So I just want to cover a couple of things too about reimbursements. You can request reimbursements up to twice a year. All of your receipts for all the costs that you're submitting reimbursement for has to be included with that request. Please label each receipt according to the budget category that you've outlined in the budget that you've submitted. And then please outline match if you have it that goes along with that reimbursement. If you requested an upfront stipend payment, you need to show the match and how that stipend payment was spent along with that first reimbursement request. Any questions on reimbursements can go to Susan Mockert, and her contact information is going to be at the end of the slide along with mine and Dana Crystal's. But you can definitely submit your reimbursements to her, and then also that prodled@wisconsin.gov email. So reimbursements, do's and don'ts. Please include the receipts which are at least equal to the amount being requested. Include the match source and amount for each request as appropriate. Mark all receipts with the budget category so we can accurately balance the grant. Do include spreadsheets with breakouts of staffing time, and then also include that cost share project and amount spreadsheet. And then please retain your records for at least 3 years. That's part of our accounting process. Next thing I'm going to quick cover is the contract change order. So this is what the now the modification of budget or change order form looks like. You what you do is you put what the original budget category was, what you want to edit it to, and then how much money you want to change within that budget category. So this change order is asking that $5,000 that were originally designated for promotional activities are now going to be moved into conservation practices. So this more formal request will really help us track what grant funds are being spent on and allow us to better track reimbursements. So this is just another example. This change order is asking that $2,000 originally designated for field days will be moved to the conservation practice cost share budget category. And then the extension request. So the extension request shows which category in your budget that you want to extend, what that expense was, and then the dollar amount. So that's fairly straightforward, and you just want to include that if you're planning on extending any funds from your grant. Extension requests are always due at the end of the year each year. So December 31st, 2020 was the last deadline for extension requests. So then I'm going to have Dana talk about the tracking project basics. This is another new addition to our grant program this year, and we're very excited about it and very excited to have Dana on board to help with this project. Dana leads this project and has a lot of conservation and technical assistance to help you and your group identify what water quality benefits and conservation benefits you're getting out of the conservation practices that your group is implementing. So she's going to go into the details of that, and I just want to say thanks for listening, and please reach out if you have any questions.
So now I'll cover the spreadsheet that we're asking groups to fill out to track their cost share incentive programs. This is the basic sheet that we're requiring all funded groups to provide back to DATCAP when they submit their final reporting materials. The information that is provided in these spreadsheets will allow us to better evaluate the water quality benefits that are provided by the different practices that are paid for by groups. And this is really integral to maintaining and building support for the producer-led program. So I'll just move through this sheet from left to right through the columns. There's a place for the date here in column A. There's a place for farm or landowner name. I'll just note there that if you don't feel comfortable sharing that information in the sheet when you send it back to DATCAP, just delete that column out. We don't necessarily need that information. That's more so for you to keep track of the entities that you are cost sharing, but do feel free to delete that out. Column C is just for the operation type, so grain, dairy, beef, vegetable, or if it's something else. Column D is for you to put in what the current rotation is for that farm that you're cost sharing, fully well acknowledging that that rotation might vary a little bit depending on the fields that you're looking at, but just sort of a best representation of the crop rotation that that farm uses. Column E is the actual practice that is cost shared. F is for a little bit more of the practice detail, and then G, we're trying to capture what the management shift has been. So we'll just go through an example here. So if the top row here, go pack, go farm, you're cost sharing cover crops, and the practice detail would be, well, what crop is that cover crop being planted after? So in this particular instance, it's cover crop after soybeans, where previously this particular landowner wasn't planting cover crops at all. And maybe that's on his whole farm, or maybe that's just on this particular field. We're kind of leaving that up to the entities that are filling this out to determine. Let's go to cowboy acres here. So the practice that's cost shared is reduced till, no till. So the shift was from a vertical tillage implement to no till. And then, for example, we'll go through the soil health family farms too. So this was a cover crop cost share. Also, in interseeding, previously there was no cover crop after the corn crop. This is a corn soybean rotation, but the switch here was interseeding a multi-species cover crop into the corn grain crop. So we're asking for just a little bit more detail on the particular practices that are being cost shared, because this is just really going to add a little bit more robustness and strength to the evaluations that we can do, just provide better estimates of the different water quality benefits that this program is providing to the state of Wisconsin. So in column H and I, these are a little bit different. So we fully well acknowledge that a lot of the farmers that groups are working with on a particular practice, they might be planting many more acres than they're actually receiving cost share payments for. So if you are aware of that information, if you know that a farmer has planted 500 acres of rye after their beans or something like that, but they're only receiving cost share for 50, that's still really valuable information for us to know, and again adds strength to our evaluation and modeling. So if you have that information, again, we'd appreciate knowing that. And then column J and K, excuse me, those are just to track payments. So pretty self-explanatory there. So this is just a screenshot of the Producer-Led Web Page, just to show you where to find and access these different tracking sheets. So again, there's the basic sheet, which I just went through, but then there's also the advanced sheet. So for those of you who may be interested in getting a little bit more detailed with tracking your incentive programs and doing actual analysis on like a field-by-field basis, I'd be happy to work with you through that. But otherwise, you can just pull the basic sheet from the web page here.
I just want to say thanks again for participating in this training on the Producer-Led Watershed Protection Grant Program. All of our contact information is listed on this page. I'm Rachel Rushman. I'm the program manager, so any program-related questions, you can absolutely reach out. Dana Crystal is our conservation specialist and specifically is working on the tracking project. So if you have any conservation-related questions or tracking-related questions, feel free to reach out to her. And then Susan Mockert is our financial specialist, and she manages all of the reporting and reimbursements and tracking related to that. And so feel free to reach out to her regarding any questions on that. Also, the producer-led web page is on the right-hand side of the page here, and will include all of the forms and everything that you are looking for. And again, thanks and have a great day.